We've all seen them, right? In the movies, these giant, leathery-winged creatures soaring through the sky next to a T-Rex. And we all call them the same thing, flying dinosaurs. But what if I told you that a huge part of what we think we know is just wrong? Let's dig in.
I mean, it seems like such an obvious question, doesn't it? They're ancient reptiles, they lived during the time of the dinosaurs, so they must be flying dinosaurs. But in paleontology, sometimes the most obvious answer isn't the right one at all. And here it is, straight from the scientists. A big, fat, definitive no. Pterosaurs, the group that includes the famous Pterodactyls, were not dinosaurs. Not a subtype, not a weird offshoot, but a completely separate group of animals. So, how on earth did we get this so mixed up for so long?
Yeah, this isn't just some small, harmless mistake. It's a myth that's been built up for decades, to the point where it's basically become an accepted fact. Let's pull back the curtain and see who the myth makers really are. And yep, the culprits are everywhere. Think about the movies, the video games. They're always shown flying around with the dinosaurs. Even early museum displays and those old science books we grew up with did the same thing, probably just to keep things simple. But all that repetition, over and over again, it just cemented this idea in our collective minds.
Okay, so to really bust this myth wide open, we have to ask a more fundamental question. What actually is a dinosaur? And the answer, believe it or not, is all in the hips.
You see, dinosaur isn't just a catch-all term for any big old reptile. In biology, Dinosauria is a super specific classification. Think of it like a very exclusive family club. To get in, you have to prove you came from one specific common ancestor, and you gotta have a very particular set of features. The membership rules are strict. And here is the #1 item on the checklist, the ultimate litmus test for being a dinosaur. It's all about how you stand. Your legs have to be positioned directly underneath your body, giving you an upright stance, kind of like how a horse or a dog stands. It's a super efficient design for moving on land. And this, right here, is the big reason pterosaurs don't get past the velvet rope. All right, so we've got our dinosaur litmus test. Let's bring in the pterosaur and see how it measures up. It's time to let the bones do the talking. And this just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the classic dinosaur stance, legs right under the body, perfectly built for walking and running. But then, look at the pterosaur. The limbs are kind of splayed out to the side. Their entire body was an engine for flight, not for taking a long stroll. So, right out of the gate, they fail the stance test. Big time. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. Let's talk about the wings. Birds, which, and this is key, are living dinosaurs, have these incredible wings made of feathers, supported by their whole arm and multiple fingers. But a pterosaur wing? It's a completely different piece of evolutionary tech. It's a membrane of skin stretched out along one single, incredibly long finger. These are two totally separate inventions to solve the problem of getting into the air. So the anatomy is a dead giveaway, but the family tree really seals the deal. They weren't parent and child or even siblings. Think of them more like distant cousins who went off and did completely different things with their lives. Okay, let's fire up the time machine and go back about 250 million years. Way back then, there was a common ancestor group called the Archosaurs. But from this one group, the family tree had a major split. One branch took off and eventually became the dinosaurs, the undisputed kings of the land. The other branch went in a totally different direction, leading to the Pterosaurs, who would become the future rulers of the sky. Two separate branches, evolving side by side through time. And that's really the heart of it. They're related, sure, but it's a distant relationship. Saying a pterosaur is a dinosaur is kind of like saying a cat is a type of dog, just because they both have 4 legs and fur. They're cousins, not part of the same immediate family. There's a perfect modern analogy for this: birds and bats. Think about it. They both fly, right? They're both absolute masters of the air. But one is an avian dinosaur and the other is a mammal. They figured out how to fly completely independently of one another. This is a classic case of something called convergent evolution. It's when different animals come up with the same solution to the same problem. That is exactly the deal with pterosaurs and birds. Same goal, totally different playbook. Okay, so if the evidence is this clear-cut, why are we still so confused about it? Why does this mix-up just refuse to go away? Let's break down some of the most common reasons people still lump these two amazing groups together. All right,
Let's tackle these common arguments head on. First up, but they lived at the same time. Well, fair point, but so did the very first mammals, and we don't call them dinosaurs. Just living together doesn't mean you're in the same family. Next, okay, but if birds are flying dinosaurs, why aren't pterosaurs? That's a great question, but like we just saw, flight evolved multiple times. Pterosaur flight and bird flight are two separate, amazing inventions. And finally, the name game. So many of us just call them pterodactyls, but that's just one type, like saying lion when you mean all cats. The correct scientific name for the whole group is Pterosauria.
All right, enough about what they weren't. Let's give these incredible animals their proper due and appreciate them for what they were. Because honestly, once you pull them out from under the shadow of the dinosaurs, their real story is way, way cooler. I mean, this is what makes pterosaurs so incredible. They were true pioneers, the trailblazers. They were the very first animals with backbones in the entire history of Earth to achieve powered flight. They flopped, they soared, and they absolutely ruled the skies for millions upon millions of years before the first bird ever even existed. And the sheer scale of these creatures, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The largest known pterosaur, Quetzalcoatlus, had a wingspan of over 10 meters. That's more than 33 feet. We're talking the size of a small airplane. These were, without a single doubt, the largest flying animals our planet has ever seen, period. So, the next time you see one of these magnificent creatures on screen, I hope you'll see it differently. Don't think flying dinosaur. Think of them for what they really were, a completely unique and spectacular evolutionary success story. They weren't a dinosaur sideshow. They were the undisputed original masters of the prehistoric skies.